given this population, the military population, and the high mobility that exists, it does cut down on kids when they move from one school to another school. They're able to kind of maintain contact with some of their social support systems, which then tends to decrease some of that isolation that they may feel when they move to new duty stations. So that's one of the positives. And then it also helps them to be able to connect with other people, whether it's family that live in other areas. And then it also helps them to be able to look up things and, topics that they may not necessarily feel comfortable talking to parents, that they should talk to parents about for whatever reason. So, it's a good source of information sometimes, but it can also be detrimental if it's done in too much, as with anything. I would say that in the majority of the cases of kids that I work with, social media is actually more harmful than it is positive. For a couple reasons. One, because it's easy to sit behind a keyboard and make negative comments about people, especially if kids are already, on the fringe of the social groups. I know that when we were growing up, you had, the popular kids or the athletes or, the non-popular kids or whatever. And nowadays with the social media, it makes it easier to engage in online bullying. And we know that things that get posted online aren't necessarily true. We tend to, edit and make it our best version of ourselves. And kids don't always recognize that what they see is not always reality. And so then that tends to get internalized. There was a recent study, actually it was published this year, called the Adolescent Brain Cognitive Development Study. And it talked about not necessarily social media, but screen time in general, and how having too much screen time, kids tend to internalize, right? So then we see an increase in depression, we see an increase in anxiety, we see difficulties with self-esteem and that type of stuff. And then you add in the social media aspect where they get to see what everybody else is doing or living their best lives, and then they're not. So then that also gets turned inward, and then just perpetuates this whole, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy, and then also tends to increase those feelings of depression or isolation or anxiety. So, and we know that when we're looking at the brain and how the brain focuses, right, when we're looking for that positive affirmation or we think about something, we know that social media and screen time in general can be addictive. And so just like with any other addiction, when you go to pick up your phone and to look and you have a message or a response, it triggers all that dopamine and serotonin and the other chemicals that are in our brain, and it drives us to want to do it more. Because just like with any other addiction, we need more and more and more of it to get us to that same level of euphoria that we first experienced. At the middle school level, absolutely. At the high school level, absolutely. At the elementary level, it's not so much social media as much as it is screen time and getting to play games and that type of stuff. And that's probably the number one issue when you talk to parents. When parents come in and see me, they say, little Johnny's acting out in this way, this way, this way, this way. One of my first questions is, how much screen time are they having? Because we know that too much screen time, as previously mentioned, kind of causes kids to turn inward, right? For the younger kids, not having that can increase that acting out behavior. And so talking to parents about reducing that screen time is important. Really, it's not just a crisis that is associated with teens or adolescents or even younger kids. It's really more of a family systems issue where we've become so used to having phones and information and the ability to talk to people right at our fingertips that we lose that ability to talk to people face to face. Because then we have a breakdown in communication within the family. We have a breakdown in those relationships. And relationships are important because you don't want your child to be getting information off of TikTok about what they're supposed to be doing. I had a kiddo who came to me and we were talking, and They were like, well, yeah, this is how I know that, this is my issue, because I saw it on TikTok. Well, 4 weeks later, we have another thing on TikTok. Well, actually, I think this is really my issue because, this matches up more. So without being able to have those connections and those relationships, our kids are getting information from sources that we may not want them to get information from. And social media, especially with TikTok and all the different TikTok challenges that are out there, not always the healthiest or the smartest. And, our kids find groups that promote self-harming. They promote, more suicide ideation, more like cutting type behaviors or eating disorder type behaviors. And if we're not paying attention, there's these whole communities out there that are devoted just to those topics. And they're getting smarter in being able to cover their tracks as Instagram or TikTok, change their rules for what the name can be. Kids will add letters to the name. So now it's not self-harm, but now it's self-harm with like 3 or 4 M's to it, right? And so it makes it more difficult to crack down on what our kids are viewing. And oftentimes, to be honest, kids are smarter than we are when it comes to technology. So the probability, not the possibility, but the probability that a kiddo has the account that they show mom and dad, like, look, see, I just have pictures of cute kittens on here. And then they have a secret account over here where all the things that they don't want mom and dad to see, that's, where things are located at. I would say definitely be more involved and monitor what your kids are doing. On phones, put in the parental locks, put in what they have access to. On the iPhone, on Android, you can put in on the settings page, you can do different types of parental locks, whether you're monitoring how much time they're on their phone, what apps they can have access to, what type of content they can have access to. You can go in and do all of that, and you can set a passcode for it. Do not set a passcode in front of them because they're smart. They may not be looking at you, but they're watching what numbers you're pushing, so they're going to know what the password is. And so, just be more aware and make sure that, if your kiddo has a TikTok account, you're going in and you're looking at who their friends are. And then you can go to those friends and see if any of them have a different account. So you can have to do some sleuthing, break out your, magnifying glass and try to figure out where the connections are to see, is there a secret account that I don't know about? But all of these friends that are on my child's page that I know about and that are liking all the cute kitten pictures, weirdly, they're also friends with this person over here. And that looks a lot like my kid too. And so really kind of paying attention to that. But definitely putting on the parental locks, definitely, locking down some of the apps that they have access to. And then not feeling bad when your kid says, but everybody else has TikTok. Everybody else has Instagram. Great. You're not everybody else. Until they're 18 and they're paying for their phone on their own, that phone is still yours. And so until your child has demonstrated that you can trust them and they're going to make good choices, that phone is still yours. So you have every right to go in and check and see what they're saying. And that also provides this extra layer of accountability for the kids because they know that mom or dad are going to come in and they're going to look at my messages. They're going to see what my history is. They're going to go to all these different sites. And that's part of parenting. It's not, a kid does not have the right to privacy unless they've earned that right. And they earn that right by proving that they're trustworthy and that they're going to do what they say they're going to do. But if they break that trust, then you're back to ground zero. Encourage them to hang out with their friends in person. Think about back when you were a kid. Did your parents let you go talk to just anybody, or did they need to know who you were talking to and who their parents were and what the phone numbers were? And nowadays, you ask a kid, hey, who's your best friend? And they'll be like, Jane. Well, what's Jane's last name? Well, I don't know. Then how are they your best friend if you don't know this information about them? What are their parents' names? I don't know. So as a parent, it's not easy to have your kid hate you or dislike you or anything like that, but it's our responsibility as parents to ensure our children stay safe. And in doing so, we have to get them to understand that social media, screen time, having a phone, those are all privileges that come with responsibility. And if you're not able to manage that responsibility, then you're not entitled to that privilege. And get them to engage more person to person, in person, have their friends come over, spend the night, have them go over and spend the night, get to know their parents, have their friends' parents' numbers in your phone so that you can call or they can call you to check in. Because at the end of the day, you're not here to be your parent or your child's friend. You're here to make sure they navigate this time in their life from childhood through adolescent into adulthood and make it in one piece and in the best shape that they can. And so that sometimes means not so pleasant times for you. Communicate with your kid. Be aware of what they're doing. Be aware of what apps they're on. Be aware of how much screen time they're, having. Limit the amount of screen time during the week. They're already getting a ton of screen time at school during the week. Even though it's educational stuff, they're still, staring into a computer screen. Have that open lines of communication. Limit the amount of time that they're doing it. Encourage them to get outside or involved in other activities. Have face-to-face contact with their friends. Get to know their friends. Get to know their friends' parents. Just be involved.